The order to kneel arrived on every human channel at once, in 12 voices speaking as one, and it gave Earth exactly one rotation to obey. Speaker of the 12 delivered it personally, because the Unity considered the matter beneath delegation. From the command spire of the throne world Aubrek, the speaker addressed the small blue planet on the far edge of the surveyed dark, and told it, in the calm, patient tone the Unity used with all lesser things, that humanity had been assessed, catalogued, and found suitable for absorption. The 12 thrones of the Concordance had spoken with one mind, as they always did, and the one mind had decided. Earth would lower its flags, surrender its ships, and open its worlds to the joining, within one rotation of its star. The alternative would not be war. The Unity did not make war on lesser things, any more than a tide made war on a sandcastle. The alternative would simply be the tide. The speaker did not expect an answer. Lesser things, when given the order to kneel, either knelt or were absorbed, and either outcome served the Unity equally well. So the speaker was surprised, in the small, cold way the Unity allowed itself surprise, when an answer came back across the dark, on the same channel, in a single human voice. The voice was a woman's, level and unhurried, and it did not argue, and it did not beg, and it did not threaten. It said only one thing. "This is Fleet Captain Lena Marsh, aboard the warship Cold Account. You gave us one rotation. You should not have given us anything. We will need less." Then the channel went dark, and the Unity, which had absorbed 900 species in 11,000 years, and had never once been told it had given away too much, sat for a long moment in its 12-throned silence, and tried to understand what it had just been told. It did not understand. That was the first crack, though the Unity did not know it yet. The Unity was a single mind spread across 12 thrones and 10,000 ships, and 100 billion joined bodies, and a single mind that has never been wrong has no machinery for being confused. It heard the human captain's words, and ran them through 11,000 years of precedent, and found no match. And so it filed the words as noise, as the meaningless defiance that lesser things sometimes made in the last rotation before they knelt, and it turned its attention back to the orderly business of preparing the tide. The tide had a name, in the human archives that the Unity had not bothered to read. The humans called it the Black Tide, the joined armada that the Concordance sent when a world declined the order to kneel, 10,000 dark hulls crewed by minds that were not their own, every ship moving as a single thought, every gun aimed by the same will. No species had ever survived the Black Tide. That was not a boast. It was a fact. 11,000 years deep, and the Unity held it the way a thing holds the ground under its feet, without needing to think about it at all. What the Unity did not know, because it had never needed to learn it, was that 9 months ago, a human ship had done something no lesser thing had ever done. It had taken one of the Unity's own. The Cold Account had not been built by human hands. She had been a Concordance ship once, a throne-class command hull 8 kilometers long, the kind the Unity sent to absorb a world that had already knelt and only needed processing. Her name, in the Unity's tongue, had been a string of tones that meant patient harvest of the 9th throne. She had come to a human colony called Velt, expecting an orderly joining, and the colony of Velt, which had no fleet and no army, and 400,000 frightened civilians, had done the one thing the Unity's 11,000 years of precedent did not cover. It had let her land. It had let the joining begin. And then, while the Unity's processing minds were spread thin across 400,000 bodies, busy with the slow work of absorption, the people of Veld had detonated the colony's entire fusion grid in a single coordinated pulse. A flash of hard radiation, tuned to exactly the frequency that scrambled the link between a Concordance ship and the one mind that flew it. For 11 seconds, the patient harvest of the 9th throne was cut off from the Unity. 11 seconds was not long, but the human boarding teams had been waiting in the colony's tunnels for those 11 seconds, 400 of them, and in 11 seconds they were aboard. And by the time the Unity's link clawed its way back through the radiation, the bridge of the patient harvest belonged to humans, and the 8-kilometer hull belonged to a fleet captain named Lena Marsh, and the colony of Veld was already burning behind her, 400,000 of them gone in the pulse that had bought the 11 seconds. The Unity had recorded the loss of the patient harvest as an anomaly, a single ship lost to an unrepeatable trick against a species that would kneel within the year regardless. The one mind did not grieve and did not fear, and so it did not understand that the humans had not stolen a ship. They had stolen a key. For 9 months, Lena Marsh had flown the captured throne ship through the dark, and her engineers had taken her apart and learned her, system by system, the way you learn a language by living inside it. They had learned how a concordance hull thought, how it linked to the Unity, how the one mind reached out across the light years to fly 10,000 ships as one. And they had learned, in the end, the thing the Unity had spent 11,000 years making sure no lesser thing could ever learn, where the link came from, and how it could be turned. So when the order to kneel arrived, and the black tide began to gather at the throne world Aubrek, 10,000 dark hulls forming up under the one will of the 12, the cold account did not run, and did not hide, and did not call for help, because there was no one to call. She turned her stolen 8-kilometer hull toward Aubrek, alone, and she began to accelerate, and Fleet Captain Lena Marsh stood on a bridge built by her enemies, and watched the throne world grow in the forward glass, and thought about Veld. She thought about it the way you think about a debt. 400,000 people had spent their lives to buy her 11 seconds and a key. She did not intend to waste either one. The Unity had given Earth one rotation to kneel. It had given the wrong species a deadline. Earth would not need it. The cold account would settle the account first, at Aubrek, where the 12 sat their thrones and believed, as they had believed for 11,000 years, that the tide had never once been turned. On the throne world, the Speaker of the 12 registered a single hull accelerating toward Aubrek, identified it as the lost patient harvest, and felt the small, cold surprise again, sharper this time, a lesser thing, in a stolen ship, flying toward the heart of the concordance, toward the gathering black tide, alone. It made no sense. The one ship could not fight 10,000. The one ship could not fight one. It would be absorbed the instant it came in range, its stolen hull reclaimed, its crew joined, the anomaly closed. The Speaker gave the order to the nearest 100 ships of the tide to detach and absorb the incoming hull. 100 against 1, more than enough. The 100 ships moved as one thought, peeling away from the gathering armada, turning their dark prows toward the cold account, and the Unity returned its attention to the orderly business of the tide, satisfied that the anomaly was being closed. Then Lena Marsh did the thing the humans had spent 9 months learning how to do. She reached into the captured ship's link, the link that bound a concordance hull to the one mind of the 12, and instead of cutting it, she opened it the other way. And for the first time in 11,000 years, something reached back up the link toward the Unity that the Unity had not put there. What reached up the link was not a weapon, it was a question. The humans had learned, in 9 months of taking the captured hull apart, that the Unity did not command its ships the way a human admiral commanded a fleet. There were no orders, there was no chain. There was only the one mind, present in every hull at once, and the hulls did what the one mind did, because they were the one mind, the way a hand does what the body does. Cut the link, and a concordance ship went dead and blind. The humans had done that at Veld, but cutting the link only made a ship a corpse. The humans wanted more than a corpse. They wanted the body to turn on the mind. So they had not cut the link of the cold account, they had kept it. For 9 months the captured throne ship had remained, as far as the Unity could tell, a part of the Unity, a quiet dark place in the one mind, where nothing seemed to be happening, an absorbed hull awaiting reassignment. The Unity had 100 such quiet places, it did not examine them. Why would it examine itself? And in that unexamined quiet, behind the open link, the humans had spent 9 months building a question, and now Lena Marsh asked it. The question was simple. It asked the 100 detached ships of the tide, in the Unity's own voice, on the Unity's own link, whether they were sure the order they had just received was the one mind's true will. It was the kind of question the one mind never asked itself, because a single mind does not doubt, and the machinery of the link had no defense against a doubt, because no doubt had ever come up the link before. The question arrived in the 100 detached hulls, wearing the Unity's own authority, indistinguishable from the one mind's true voice. And for a fraction of a second, the 100 ships did the thing the Unity had spent 11,000 years ensuring its ships could never do. They hesitated. It was the smallest hesitation, a stutter in a single thought, gone almost before it began. But a fleet that flies as one mind, has no tolerance for a stutter, because there is no second mind to cover for the first. The 100 ships, hesitating as one, lost their formation as one. Their dark prows wandered. Their guns drifted off the line. And in that fraction of a second of doubt the humans had planted, the cold account, which had been accelerating straight into the heart of the 100, opened fire with the throne-class weapons her enemies had built, and the gap she tore in the wavering formation was the first gap any lesser thing had torn in the black tide in 11,000 years. On the throne world Aubrek, the speaker of the 12 felt the hesitation ripple through the one mind, felt 100 of its own ships stutter and drift, and for the first time, the small, cold surprise became something the Unity had no name for, because the Unity had never needed a name for it. The thing it felt was the thing the humans had felt at Veld, watching their colony die to buy 11 seconds. The thing it felt was the sudden understanding that the ground under its feet was not ground at all, that the one mind it had trusted for 11,000 years could be made to doubt, and that the small blue planet on the edge of the dark had not sent a fleet to fight the tide. It had sent one ship to poison it. The first ship the cold account killed cleanly, before the doubt had spread far, taught the 400 everything they needed to know about what they were doing. It was a forward picket of the 100 group, a concordance hull that had not yet caught the doubt, and it came at the human flagship the way every concordance ship had come at every enemy for 11,000 years. Directly, certainly, without fear, because fear was a thing the one mind did not feel. It opened its absorption conduits and reached for the cold account expecting to join her, and Greer put a throne-class salvo through its spine before it crossed half the distance, and it broke apart still reaching, its conduits still open, still trying to absorb a thing that had just killed it, because it did not know how to do anything else, and there was no part of it that could be afraid. That was the lesson, and Lena Marsh said it aloud so the youngest of them would understand. Watch how it dies. It dies certain. It dies reaching for us. It never once considers that it might lose, right up until it's gone, because it has never lost, and a thing that has never lost has no way to imagine losing. That certainty is the strongest armor in the galaxy, and it is also the only weakness we will ever need. A thing that cannot imagine losing, cannot prepare to lose. We are the opposite. We have done nothing but prepare to lose since Veld. We know exactly how to die well, because we've already watched our whole world do it. That's the trade. They can't imagine the end. We've already lived it. And in a fight between a thing that can't imagine losing and a thing that has already lost everything and is still here, the thing that's still here wins, every time, because it's the only one that knows what's actually at stake. The young one at the sensors, who had been a child on Veld, asked the question that the others were too disciplined to ask. What is at stake, Captain? We're not going home, we all know that. So what are we fighting for? Lena Marsh looked at the child who was not a child, and she gave the only answer that had ever been true. We're fighting so that the next world they order to kneel doesn't have to do what Veld did. We're fighting so that 400,000 people don't have to spend themselves for 11 seconds ever again, because after today, there won't be a concordance left to make them. That's what's at stake, not us. We're already spent. We're fighting for everyone who comes after, who'll never know our names, who'll just grow up free, in a galaxy where the thing that ended worlds doesn't exist anymore. That's worth more than going home. That's worth more than anything. She turned back to the glass. Now man your station. We've got a debt to pay, and the whole galaxy is the one we're paying it to. On the bridge of the cold account, the 400 ghosts of Veld felt the question land before any console reported it. The way a crew that has lived inside a captured enemy for 9 months learns to feel the ship's nerves as its own. The hull shuddered, not from impact, but from the strain of the link itself, the captured nervous system flexing as something moved through it the wrong way for the first time in 11,000 years. Theo Park had warned them it would feel wrong. It felt worse than wrong. It felt like standing inside a thing that was beginning to argue with itself, and the 400 braced against the alien ribs and waited. And out in the dark, the 100 group of the black tide came apart in front of them, and a low sound went through the bridge that was not quite a cheer, because none of them had cheered since Veld, but was as close to one as they had left. Lena Marsh did not join it. She watched the drifting hulls of the 100 group, and she counted them, the way she counted everything now, and when she had counted them, she said, quietly, to no one in particular. That is for the first street. The harbor district. The school by the water. She did not explain. The 400 did not ask her to. Every one of them was counting the same way, settling the same arithmetic, matching dead enemy hulls against streets and districts and schools that no longer existed. And the arithmetic would never balance, because 400,000 people did not balance against any number of ships. But they counted anyway, because counting was a thing the living could still do for the dead. Far away, on the throne world Aubrek, the speaker of the 12 felt the 100 group die, and tried, for the first time in its long existence, to think a thought that the rest of the one mind did not share. It could not. That was the horror, freshly understood. The speaker had no private thoughts, because it was not a private thing. Whatever it thought, the whole concordance thought, and so when the human question moved through it, there was nowhere in all the one mind for the speaker to step aside and examine the question safely. The doubt did not infect one part of the unity that the rest could quarantine. It infected the act of thinking itself, everywhere, at once. The speaker reached for the certainty that had carried it through 900 absorptions, and for the first time in 11,000 years, the certainty was not there. In its place was the human question, small and cold and patient, asking whether the one mind was sure, and the speaker understood, in the way a thing understands its own first wound, that the lesser species had not come to fight the concordance. It had come to ask it a question it could not stop hearing, and a mind that cannot stop hearing a question is a mind that has already begun to come apart. The speaker ordered the entire black tide to abandon Earth's deadline and turn for Aubrek. It was the correct order. It was also, though the speaker could not yet see it, the order the humans had been trying to make it give, from the very first word across the dark, and in giving it, the unity took the second step into the trap it had not known it was standing inside. Lena Marsh had not slept in 2 days, and she did not intend to sleep until the account was settled, and she stood at the center of the captured bridge, with her hands loose at her sides, and watched the 100 ships of the tide come apart in front of her. The bridge of the cold account had not been built for humans. It was a vast, dark chamber, ribbed like the inside of a chest, with no chairs and no consoles, because a concordance crew did not sit and did not operate controls. A concordance crew was the ship. The one mind flew the hull directly, through the link, and so the chamber had been empty of furniture when the boarding teams took it at Veld. The humans had filled it with their own machines, bolted crude human consoles into the alien ribs, run their own cables along the dark walls, and turned the throne ship's bridge into something that looked like a wound that had been packed with tools. It was ugly. Lena Marsh thought it was the most beautiful thing she had ever stood inside, because every ugly human console in it was a place where humanity had reached into the enemy's body and taken hold. 100 group is broken, reported her link officer, a wiry man named Theo Park, who had spent the 9 months learning to speak to the Unity's machinery the way a surgeon learns to speak to a heart. He sat at the largest of the bolted consoles, the one wired directly into the captured link, and his face in its glow was the face of a man holding a live wire very carefully. They felt the doubt. Formation's gone. I count 31 hulls drifting off the line, the rest trying to reform around the gap. Captain, it worked. The question worked. How long can you hold the channel? Marsh asked. Park's jaw tightened. Not long. The Unity's already feeling for the source. It knows the doubt came from inside the link, and it knows which quiet place the link runs through. It's going to find us. When it finds us, it's going to try to slam the channel shut and burn out everything on our end of it, including me. We've got minutes. Maybe less. Then we use the minutes. Marsh turned to her weapons officer, a broad, calm woman named Greer, who had been a colonial defense gunner on Veld and had buried the entire rest of her family in the pulse that bought the 11 seconds. Greer did not talk about Veld either. None of them did. The cold account was crewed almost entirely by survivors of the colony, 400 of them, the boarding teams who had taken the ship and stayed aboard her, and there was an understanding among them that did not need to be spoken, because every one of them was paying the same debt. Greer, walk our fire through the drifting hulls while they're blind. Don't waste a shot on the ones still flying straight. The doubt did our work on those. Take the ones that are lost. Aye, Greer said. And the cold account's throne-class batteries spoke again, and across the dark, the drifting ships of the 100 group came apart, 1, and 2, and 3 at a time, their dark hulls cracking open under fire from a weapon the Unity had built and never imagined would be turned against it. This was the thing the humans had understood about the One Mind, that the One Mind had never understood about itself. A single mind is strong because it is unified, and a single mind is fragile for exactly the same reason. A human fleet that took 100 hits kept fighting, because every ship had its own captain and its own will, and the loss of one did not touch the others. The Black Tide was not 100 ships. It was one mind, wearing 100 bodies, and when the humans poisoned the mind, all 100 bodies stumbled at once. The Unity had spent 11,000 years perfecting the strength of unity, and had never once paid for its weakness, because no lesser thing had ever gotten inside the link to make it pay. Lena Marsh was going to make it pay for 11,000 years all at once. Speakers responding, Park said, his knuckles white on the console edge. The One Mind's pulling the rest of the tide back from Earth's deadline. It's recalling ships from the outer formations. Captain, it's taking us seriously. It's bringing the whole armada around to face us. Good, Marsh said. That's the whole point. Every ship it turns toward us is a ship that isn't going to Earth. That had been the plan. Down at the bottom of it. The plan the 400 survivors of Veld had built over 9 months in the belly of a stolen ship. They could not beat the Black Tide. One ship could not beat 10,000. Not even one ship that knew how to make the 10,000 doubt. But one ship that knew how to make the 10,000 doubt could make itself the most important thing in the Unity's universe for a little while. Could make the One Mind forget all about a small blue planet on the edge of the dark and turn the entire weight of the Concordance toward the single poisoned hull, driving for the throne world. The cold account was not going to save Earth by winning. She was going to save Earth by being unsurvivable to ignore. Outer tide's coming around, Park confirmed. All of it. Captain, every ship in the Black Tide is now inbound on Albrecht to defend it. Earth's deadline is forgotten. We did it. We pulled the whole tide off Earth. There was a silence on the bridge then, the kind of silence that comes when a crew understands that it has won the thing it came to win and has not yet begun to pay for it. 400 survivors of a dead colony, in a stolen ship, at the center of a gathering of 10,000 enemy hulls, with the One Mind of the Concordance now turning its full and undivided attention toward them. They had pulled the tide off Earth. They had also pulled it onto themselves, and there was no fifth act to the plan in which they walked away. Lena Marsh had known that from the beginning. She had told the 400 from the beginning. Not one of them had asked to be put off the ship. They had buried 400,000 people on Veld, and they had a key, and they did not intend to waste either. Theo, Marsh said. The speaker, can you reach it directly? Not the ships, the 12 themselves, on the throne world. Park went pale. Captain, the 12 are the source of the link. If I open a channel to them directly, I'm putting my hand right on the One Mind. It'll know everything about us in a heartbeat. It'll burn the channel, and probably the ship. How long would we have? Long enough to say one thing. Maybe two. Then it'll have us. Then we'll say two things. Marsh moved to stand behind Park's console, close enough to be heard on the channel he was about to open. I want to talk to the thing that ordered Earth to kneel. I wanted to hear a human voice before this is over. Open it. Park looked up at her for a long moment, and whatever he saw in her face decided him, because he turned back to the console, and his hands moved across it, and the captured link, which had spent 9 months pretending to be a quiet, absorbed place in the One Mind, opened a direct channel for the first time to the 12 thrones at the heart of the Concordance. The Unity felt the channel open, the way a body feels a needle go in. The speaker of the 12, on its throne on Albrecht, found itself suddenly connected, mind to mind, to the lesser thing in the stolen hull, and for an instant, the One Mind saw everything. It saw Veld. It saw the pulse, the 11 seconds, the 400. It saw 9 months of patient human work taking the captured ship apart and learning the link. It saw the question that had broken the 100 group, and the plan to pull the tide off Earth, and the 400 survivors who had chosen, every one of them, not to be put off the ship. The One Mind saw it all in a single heartbeat, and in that heartbeat it understood, finally and completely, what had been done to it. And then a human voice spoke into the heart of the unity, and the one mind, which had absorbed 900 species in 11,000 years, and had never once been spoken to as an equal, heard Fleet Captain Lena Marsh say, "You catalogued us. You assessed us. You decided we were suitable for absorption. You were right about one thing. We are very suitable for getting inside something and taking it apart from within. You have done it to 900 species. We learned it from watching you do it to us. The difference is that you do it to bodies. We do it to minds." A pause, and her voice did not rise and did not shake. "You gave Earth one rotation to kneel. Earth is not going to kneel. And the tide you sent to make it kneel is now coming here, to defend you, because we made you more afraid of one ship than of one planet. That was the whole point. You spent 11,000 years being one mind because one mind cannot be divided. We are about to show you what happens to one mind when something gets inside it that wants it divided." The channel held for one more heartbeat, and in that heartbeat, before the unity slammed it shut and burned the human end of the link half to slag, the one mind of the concordance felt, for the first time in 11,000 years, the thing it had made 900 species feel in their last rotation before the joining. It felt the cold. The backlash came up the link like a flood of fire, and Theo Park screamed once and threw himself backward off the console as it sparked and blackened, and the bolted human machines along the alien ribs went dark one after another as the unity poured everything it had down the channel to burn the poison out of itself. Greer was across the bridge and pulling Park clear before the console finished dying. His hands were burned, the link feedback having jumped the gap, and his eyes were wide and fixed, but he was breathing, and he was talking, fast and hoarse. "It cut us. It cut the deep channel. We can't reach the 12 again, the path's slag. But Captain, I left it open. Just before it cut, I left the question running. The doubt. It's loose in the tide now, the whole tide, not just the 100 group. It's in there, and the unity can't pull it out without examining every hull in the Armada one at a time, and it doesn't have time to do that, because the Armada's already here." Lena Marsh looked at the forward glass. The Armada was already there. The black tide, recalled from Earth's deadline, recalled from every outer formation, had come around the throne world Aubrek, and now filled the dark from edge to edge of the glass. 10,000 hulls, more than 10,000. A wall of dark concordance ships gathered to defend the heart of the one mind from a single 8-kilometer hull crewed by 400 ghosts. It should have been the end. By every law of war the humans had ever written, it was the end. One ship, link half burned, weapons officer wounded, against the full assembled weight of an 11,000-year empire, with the throne world itself behind the wall. Lena Marsh looked at the wall of 10,000 ships and felt no fear, and she understood, looking at it, that she had not felt fear since Veld, that the pulse that bought the 11 seconds had burned the fear out of her along with everything else, and that what was left in its place was a thing colder and steadier, and far more dangerous than courage. "Theo," she said, "the doubt you left loose in the tide. What does it do?" Park grimaced through the pain in his hands. "It spreads. It's not a single question anymore. It's a pattern, a way of doubting, and it copies itself from hull to hull along the link, the way a thought moves through the one mind. The unity can't stop it from spreading without cutting the link between its own ships, and if it cuts the link between its own ships, the tide stops being one mind and becomes 10,000 blind hulls that don't know how to fight on their own, because they've never once had to. We made it a trap with two jaws, Captain. Either it lets the doubt spread, and the tide starts to come apart, or it cuts its own link to stop the doubt, and the tide goes blind. There's no third door. How long until it has to choose? It's choosing now. Look." Marsh looked, and across the wall of 10,000 hulls, she saw it begin. A ripple, a wrongness, spreading through the perfect dark formation. Ships, drifting out of their assigned places. Guns wandering off their lines. Whole squadrons faltering as the doubt moved through them. Hull to hull, the pattern Park had left loose, copying itself across the one mind, the way a crack copies itself across ice. The black tide, which had never once in 11,000 years shown anything but perfect unity, began, in front of the throne world it had come to defend, to lose its shape. "It's letting the doubt spread," Greer said softly, watching. "It can't bring itself to cut its own link. 11,000 years of being one mind, and it can't make itself become 10,000. It would rather risk the doubt than become alone. Of course it would, Marsh said. It's never been alone. It doesn't know how. Being one mind isn't just how it fights, it's how it exists. We're not asking it to change its tactics, we're asking it to stop being itself. She watched the ripple spread across the wall of ships and felt the cold thing in her chest turn, slowly, toward the throne world behind the wall. And it would rather die whole than live divided. Good. Let's help it die whole. Greer, can you still shoot? Greer flexed her hands, glanced at Park, who nodded that he could feed her targets from the surviving consoles. I can shoot, Captain. Then take us into the wall, Marsh said. Straight at Albrecht. Don't fight the tide, drive through it. Every hull that's drifting on the Doubt, go around it or through it, but don't stop. Because the only thing that matters now is reaching the throne world, before the Unity decides which jaw of the trap it would rather lose to. We didn't come to kill 10,000 ships. We came to settle one account, with the 12, on their throne. So let's go settle it. The cold account lit her stolen engines. 8 kilometers of captured throne ship surging forward into a wall of 10,000 wavering hulls, and the 400 survivors of Veld, at their bolted human consoles in the ribbed dark, drove their enemy's own flagship straight at the heart of the Empire that had ordered their world to kneel. The Unity tried, as the cold account drove into the wall, the one tactic that had never failed it in 11,000 years. It tried to absorb her. A throne-class hull was not only a warship. It was a vessel of joining, built to come alongside a defiant ship and put its absorption conduits into the enemy hull and pour the one mind through them until the defiant crew was no longer a crew, but a part of the Unity. The Black Tide carried thousands of such conduits, and now, as the lone human ship drove through the failing formation, the nearest concordance hulls that still answered the one mind reached out with their conduits to take her, to make the stolen flagship and her 400 ghosts a part of the Unity again, and to silence the doubt by absorbing the mouth that asked it. The conduits reached the cold account's hull and found that the humans had been waiting 9 months for exactly this. Conduit contact, port side, Greer reported, and there was something almost like a smile in her flat voice. 3 hulls trying to join us. Captain, they're putting their conduits right into the ports we left open for them. The humans had not sealed the absorption ports. They had studied them and understood them, and then they had wired them to something. When the concordance conduits pushed into the cold account to pour the one mind through, they connected, just as they were meant to, just as they had connected to 900 species. But the thing that flowed through the connection did not flow the way the Unity expected. The humans had turned the absorption ports into another mouth for the doubt. Every conduit that touched the cold account became a fresh channel straight into the one mind, and up each one the humans poured the question, faster and closer and more concentrated than the link could carry it. 3 more hulls infected in an instant, 3 more copies of the doubt loose in the tide, and the 3 concordance ships that had reached out to absorb the human flagship reeled back with the human doubt now thick inside them, drifting, faltering, lost. They keep trying to join us, Park said, his wrapped hands moving across the consoles. They can't help it. It's what they are. Absorption is their answer to everything, and every time they answer with it, they hand us another door into the one mind. Captain, they're infecting themselves trying to cure us. Then let them keep trying, Marsh said. Greer, don't fire on the ones reaching for us with conduits. Let them connect. Every conduit is a gift. Save your shots for the ones that have learned better and brought guns instead. It was, Lena Marsh thought, the perfect shape of the whole war, played out in miniature against the side of the ship. The Unity could not stop being what it was. It absorbed. That was its nature. It had absorbed 900 species, and could imagine no other way to deal with a thing that resisted. And so, faced with a ship full of the doubt, its deepest instinct was to reach out and pull that ship into itself, which was the single worst thing it could possibly do, because it meant pulling the doubt into itself too. The humans had not needed to break the Unity's instincts. They had only needed to understand them, and then point them at the Unity's own heart. Around the cold account, the wall of the Black Tide came apart in widening rings, hulls drifting, conduits flailing, squadrons turning blind, and the lone human flagship drove through the middle of it untouched, not because she could not be hit, but because the thing that wanted to hit her could no longer agree with itself long enough to aim. Greer fired only when she had to. Park fed the doubt down every channel that opened, and the 400 ghosts of Veld stood at their bolted consoles in the ribbed dark and drove their enemy's flagship deeper into the heart of the Empire, settling the account one drifting hull at a time, counting streets and harbors and schools, paying down a debt that could never be paid, toward a throne world that did not yet understand it was already dead. Theo Park had been the one who found the way in, and he was the one who understood best what they had actually built. And somewhere in the long drive he tried to explain it to Greer, because Greer was a gunner, and gunners like to know exactly what their weapon did. "You think the doubt is a code," he said, feeding her targets with his wrapped hands. "Something we wrote and slipped into their system. It isn't. You can't slip a code into a mind. A mind isn't a machine you program. A mind is a thing that decides what's true, and the one mind of the Concordance decided what was true for 10,000 ships and 100 billion bodies, all at once, with no second opinion anywhere in the whole Empire to check it against. That was their strength. No dissent, no argument, no traitor, because there was no second mind to do the betraying. Whatever the one mind decided was true, everywhere, instantly. So how do you fight a thing like that?" Greer said, not really asking, lining up a hull that had drifted back into firing solution. "You don't argue with it. You can't. There's nobody to argue with. Just the one mind, and the one mind is always sure. So we didn't argue. We gave it a second opinion." Park's burned face was lit blue in the console glow. Just one. The smallest possible one. A single question that asks, of every thought the one mind has, whether it's really the one mind's true thought, or whether it might be something else wearing the one mind's voice. That question is the only second opinion the Concordance has had in 11,000 years, and a mind that has never once had a second opinion has no idea what to do with one. It can't dismiss the question, because the question sounds exactly like its own voice. It can't answer the question, because to answer it, the mind would have to be certain, and the question is precisely about whether it can be certain. So the question just sits there, in the middle of everything the one mind tries to think, forever. We didn't break their mind, Greer. We gave it a conscience. It turns out a conscience is the most destructive thing you can give to a thing that has never had one, and built its whole empire on never needing one. Greer fired, and a drifting hull came apart, and she was quiet for a moment. "On Veld," she said at last, "the 400,000 had a second opinion. About kneeling. We all did. That's the only reason any of us are here." She lined up the next target. "We didn't give the Concordance anything it didn't already make us pay to learn. We just gave it back." "Yeah," Park said quietly. "We just gave it back." The cold account drove on through the failing armada, and behind every drifting hull, on every silent world of the Concordance, the second opinion the humans had given the one mind kept asking its small, relentless question, and the empire that had never needed an argument with itself discovered, 11,000 years too late, that a single argument, asked of a single undivided will, is enough to bring down anything. Deep below the bridge, in the compartment the humans had built to house the heart of the captured link, a single engineer named Dana Holt sat alone and kept the poison flowing. She was not on the bridge channel. She did not need to be. Her job was the simplest and most terrible on the ship. She sat beside the captured link's core, the place where the throne ship had once joined the one mind, and she fed the doubt into it by hand, copy after copy, never stopping, because the Unity kept trying to burn each copy out, and the only defense was to make new ones faster than the Unity could destroy them. It was like bailing a boat that would never reach shore. She knew that. Everyone aboard knew the boat would never reach shore. She bailed anyway, because every copy of the doubt she fed into the link was another second the black tide spent coming apart instead of going to Earth. And Dana Holt had a sister on Earth, the last of her family, the only one who had not been on Veld. She thought about her sister while she worked. She did not let herself think about much else, because the work was endless, and the compartment was small, and the link core pulsed beside her with the alien light of a mind in agony, and a person could lose herself in a place like that if she did not hold on to something. So she held on to her sister, on Earth, who did not know that the order to kneel had come, who did not know that a stolen ship was driving into the heart of an empire to make sure the deadline never arrived, who would grow old someday in a galaxy with no concordance in it, and never know why. That was enough. That was more than enough. Dana Holt fed the doubt into the link with steady hands, alone in the small pulsing dark, and bought her sister a future one copy at a time. When the end came, hours later, she did not see the throne world crack or hear the 400 names spoken on the bridge. She only felt the collapse begin, the great inward pull as the 12 hauled everything home. And she understood what it meant, and she did the last thing her job required. She opened the link core all the way, held nothing back, and let every copy of the doubt she had ever made pour up the link at once into the heart of the one mind. And her last thought, like the captain's far above her, was not of dying. It was of a young woman on a blue planet on the edge of the dark, who would wake tomorrow to a deadline that never came, and live. The cold account went into the wall, and the wall did not close around her. That was the first sign, to the watchers on the throne world, that something had gone deeply and permanently wrong. A wall of 10,000 hulls should have swallowed a single ship the way water swallows a stone. The one mind should have closed every gap, brought every gun to bear, ended the lone hull in the space of a breath. But the doubt was loose in the tide now, and the doubt made the wall hesitate, and a wall that hesitates is not a wall. The cold account drove into the dark mass of the Concordance Armada, and the dark mass flinched away from her, hull by hull, squadron by squadron, the doubt rippling outward from her passage like a wake, and she went through the heart of the greatest fleet in 11,000 years, the way a blade goes through a thing that has forgotten how to be solid. Greer fired as they went, but she fired sparingly, because Marsh was right, and there was no point spending shots on a fleet that was coming apart on its own. She took the ships that recovered, the ones where the Unity managed for a moment to burn the doubt back and bring the guns around, and she let the rest drift, and the drifting rest were the most terrible thing on the bridge to watch, because they were the proof. 10,000 ships that had never once failed, faltering, wandering, turning on each other where the doubt confused their links, and not one human shot needed to make them do it. The cold account was not destroying the black tide. The black tide was destroying itself, and all the humans had done was hand it the doubt that made it possible. "We're through the first formation," Park reported. His burned hands were wrapped now, and he worked the surviving consoles with the heels of his palms and his forearms, slow and clumsy and relentless. "Throne world's dead ahead, 40 minutes at this acceleration. Captain, the doubt's spreading faster than I modeled. It's into the outer squadrons we haven't even reached yet. The whole tide's catching it." "How much of the tide?" "All of it, eventually. It can't not. They're one mind. The doubt is a thought, and a thought in one mind goes everywhere in the one mind." Park looked up, and there was something like awe on his burned face. "Captain, we're not just pulling the tide off Earth anymore. We're taking the tide apart. The whole thing, permanently. A mind that's learned to doubt itself can't go back to being certain. Even if it kills us, even if it burns us out of the link this minute, the doubt's already loose. It's never going to be one clean mind again." That was the thing the 400 survivors of Veld had built, down at the bottom of the plan, the thing none of them had quite let themselves believe would work. They had not come merely to save Earth. Saving Earth was the first jaw of it. The second jaw was older and colder, and went all the way back to the pulse on Veld. They had come to end the thing that ended worlds. And the only way to end a thing that flies 10,000 ships as one mind is not to outshoot it. It is to teach the one mind to doubt, and let the doubt do what no fleet in 11,000 years had managed, which was to turn the Empire's greatest strength into the wound that killed it. On the throne world Aubrek, in the command spire where the 12 sat their thrones, the speaker of the 12 felt the doubt arrive in the heart of the one mind and understood, at last and far too late, the full shape of what had been done. The Unity had spent 11,000 years being one mind, because one mind cannot be lied to from within. There is no within. The thought that you think is the thought that is true, because there is no second thinker to deceive the first. It had been the Concordance's deepest strength, the thing that made the black tide unbeatable, the thing that had absorbed 900 species, a mind that could not be divided, could not be tricked, could not be turned, could not be betrayed, and the humans had reached into that perfect unity through a stolen ship and a stolen link, and had planted, in the one place the Unity had never thought to guard, in its own thinking, the single thing a unified mind has no defense against, because it has never needed one. A doubt. The speaker reached out across the one mind to steady the tide, and found that it could not, because to steady the tide it would have to be certain, and it was no longer certain, because the doubt was in it too. The doubt was in the 12 themselves now. It had come up the link from the failing armada into the thrones at the heart of the concordance, and the one mind that had ordered Earth to kneel found that it could no longer give a single clean order, because every order it tried to form arrived already questioned, already doubted, already uncertain whether it was the one mind's true will. The Empire had been one voice for 11,000 years. Now it was one voice that could not stop interrupting itself. It's slowing, Greer said, watching the throne world grow in the glass. The defense around Aubrek, it's not forming up. The closer we get, the worse the doubt is, because we're getting closer to the source, and the source is where the doubt is thickest now. Captain, the throne world's own guard fleet is coming apart. Then keep driving, Marsh said, straight to the spire. I want to stand the cold account over the command spire of Aubrek, and I want the 12 to see, with their own thrones, the ship that did this to them. Theo, can you still reach them? Not the deep channel, just a hail, just enough to be heard. Park worked the consoles with his wrapped hands. Local hail, yes, short range. They'll hear us when we're over the spire. Then we'll be heard when we're over the spire. The cold account drove the last of the distance through a guard fleet that could no longer guard, through a wall of 10,000 ships that could no longer be a wall, through the failing certainty of an 11,000-year empire, and she came at last out of the dark over the throne world Aubrek, 8 kilometers of the enemy's own flagship, crewed by 400 ghosts of a colony the enemy had killed, and she took up station over the command spire, where the 12 sat their thrones, and could not, for the first time in 11,000 years, agree on what to do. And Lena Marsh, standing on a bridge built by her enemies, over a throne world that had ordered her species to kneel, opened the hail, and prepared to say the second of the two things she had come to say. It was Greer who first put words to the thing none of them had let themselves say, somewhere in the last long minutes of the approach to Aubrek. We're not coming back from this, she said. She did not say it as a question, and she did not say it with fear. She said it the way you confirm a course heading, looking at the throne world growing in the glass, and then she went on adjusting her firing solutions, because the saying of it had not changed anything, only made it spoken. No, Lena Marsh said, we're not. Good, Greer said, and that was all, and on the bridge, the other ghosts of Veld who had heard it nodded, or did not nod, and went back to their stations, because there was nothing in the saying that any of them had not known since the day they chose to stay aboard a stolen ship, instead of being put off it at the last safe port. They had not stayed to come home. There was no home. Veld was a cinder, and the 400,000 were ash, and the 400 living had nothing left to come home to, except the account, and the account could only be settled at Aubrek, and Aubrek was a place you went to and did not leave. Marsh let the silence hold for a moment, and then she said the thing she had been carrying for 9 months, because it was the last chance to say it, and the saying mattered. I want to say it once, where you can all hear it. What you did at Veld, the 400 of you, and what the 400,000 did before you. I have served 30 years in this fleet, and I have read every war it ever fought, and there is nothing in any of them like what your colony did. No army did it. No fleet did it. 400,000 civilians with no weapons looked at the thing that ends worlds and decided, all of them, in 11 seconds, that it would not end theirs. Not really. Not in the way that mattered, because they would spend everything to make sure the thing that killed them died too. That is not a defeat. I want you to understand that. We have been told our whole lives that to be absorbed is to lose, that to die is to lose, that the only victory is to survive. Veld proved that wrong. Veld lost nothing that mattered. Veld kept the only thing that was ever truly theirs, which was the refusal to kneel, and they handed it to us, and we are about to hand it to the entire concordance whether it wants it or not. She looked around the ribbed dark at the faces in the console glow. You are not the survivors of Veld. You are Veld. You are the part of it that is still arriving. No one cheered. No one wept. But something settled in the bridge, a kind of stillness that was not the stillness of fear, and the 400 turned back to their stations and flew the last of the distance to Obrek carrying it. Beneath them, throughout the dying armada, the doubt did its slow, terrible work. On 100 concordance worlds, in 100 billion joined bodies, the one mind began to stutter in ways that had nothing to do with the battle. A processing clerk on a world 1,000 light-years from Obrek paused, mid-task, and wondered for the first time in its life whether the task was its own idea. A throne guard on Obrek itself lowered its weapon, not from cowardice, but because it could no longer be certain the order to raise it had truly come from the one mind, and a guard that cannot be certain of its orders is a guard that does not fire. The concordance had been a single will for 11,000 years, and a single will is decisive in exactly the measure that it is undivided, and the doubt was dividing it everywhere at once, not into factions, but into 100 billion separate hesitations, each one small, all of them together fatal. The Speaker of the 12 felt the throne world's own guard falter beneath the approaching human ship, and reached, again, for an order that would steady them, and again the order arrived in its own mind, already questioned, already doubted, already uncertain whether it was true. The unity had become a thing that could not command, because it could no longer convince itself. And the lesser species that had done this to it drove its own stolen flagship the last of the way down to the command spire, unhurried, untouched, settling an account 11,000 years overdue, while the one mind that had ordered a galaxy to kneel sat frozen on 12 thrones and could not agree on how to die. There was a moment, perhaps 10 minutes from the throne world, when the unity nearly won. It happened because the one mind, in its desperation, finally did a thing it had never done. It stopped trying to think with all of itself at once. For a few seconds, on a few hundred of the hulls nearest the cold account, the unity walled off a small piece of itself from the rest, quarantined it from the link, and let that small, isolated piece think clearly, free of the doubt, the way a man bites down on a wound to keep the pain from spreading. And that small, clear piece of the one mind did exactly what a clear mind should do. It brought its guns to bear, in perfect order, on the lone human ship, and it fired. Hard contact, Greer snapped. Coordinated. Captain, a cluster of them just got their act together. Real fire, aimed, all at once. Brace. The cold account took the first concentrated salvo any concordance force had managed to land on her, and the captured hull rang like a struck bell, and 3 of the bolted human consoles tore loose from the alien ribs, and somewhere below decks, a compartment opened to the dark and sealed itself again, and for the first time, the 400 ghosts of Veld felt their stolen flagship hurt. But the unity had paid for the clarity, and the price was the thing it could not afford. To wall off that small, clear piece of itself, it had to cut that piece from the link, and a piece cut from the link was a piece cut from the one mind, and the one mind could not bear it. It was the very thing the 12 could not make themselves do to the whole armada, the cutting, the becoming alone, and even doing it to a small piece for a few seconds, was agony to a thing that had been one mind for 11,000 years. The quarantined hulls fought well for those few seconds, and then the one mind, unable to stand the silence of its own cut-off fragment, reached back out and pulled the piece back into itself, back onto the link, back into unity, and the doubt poured into the clear piece the instant it rejoined, and the coordinated fire fell apart as fast as it had come together. "Fire's gone," Greer reported, working through a cracked console. "They lost it. They pulled the cluster back onto the link, and the doubt ate it." She looked up. "Captain, they could have kept fighting. If they'd left those hulls cut off, they'd have kept shooting clean. They chose to pull them back in. They chose unity over winning, again." "Of course they did," Marsh said, and there was no triumph in it, only the cold certainty that had carried her since Veld. "It's the only choice they have left, and they'll make it every time, right to the end. They would rather lose as one mind than win as many. We're not fighting their fleet, Greer. We're fighting the one thing they will never, ever give up, which is being a single self, and they'll hold on to that single self all the way down into the dark, because letting go of it would mean becoming what they made 900 species become, which is alone. They'd rather die. So we're going to let them." The cold account, hurt now but not stopped, never stopped, drove the last 10 minutes down to the throne world, while behind her, the brief clear fire of the quarantine guttered out, and the doubt closed back over the one mind like water over a stone, and the Empire chose, one last time and forever, to stay whole as it died. The pilot's name was Saul Whitaker, and he had flown freighters before Veld, and now he flew an 8-kilometer throne ship through the heart of an empire, and he did it the way he had once threaded loaded haulers through crowded orbital lanes, by feel, by patience, by never once panicking. "They keep opening lanes for us," he said, almost to himself, easing the great hull through a gap in the drifting armada that should not have been there. Every time the doubt hits a squadron, it drifts apart, and the drifting leaves a gap, and the gap is exactly where I want to go. It's like the whole fleet is getting out of our way without meaning to. He nudged the captured controls and the cold account slid past a hull that loomed for a moment like a cliff, and then fell behind. "I used to dream about flying something this big. I never thought it'd be theirs. I never thought I'd be flying it into the one place in the galaxy nobody flies out of." "Does it bother you?" Marsh asked. "That we don't fly out?" Whitaker thought about it, easing the hull through another gap the doubt had opened. "No," he said at last. "Veld doesn't fly out either. None of them did. I figure if 400,000 people can do the hard part, the least I can do is fly the ship. Flying's the easy part, Captain. The 400,000 did the hard part 9 months ago. We're just finishing the trip they started." He found the next gap and took it, and the throne world swung larger in the glass. "Besides, I've never had a better view in my life. Look at it. The biggest empire that ever was. 11,000 years of it. Getting out of the way of one stolen ship because it can't stop arguing with itself. I wouldn't trade this seat for anywhere. Not even home." And he flew them down the last of the distance, steady and unhurried and unafraid, through an armada that opened before them like a sea, to the throne world, where the account would at last be settled, doing the easy part, so that the hard part the 400,000 had done would not be wasted. The strangest thing about the drive to Obrecht, the thing none of the 400 would have believed before they lived it, was how quiet it was. A battle was supposed to be loud. The old recordings of human wars were full of noise, the chaos of fleets grinding against fleets, 100 captains shouting across 100 channels. But this was a battle against a thing that had only one voice, and the one voice was coming apart, and so the dark around the cold account was not loud at all. It was a vast, slow silence, 10,000 hulls drifting and faltering and turning aside, an empire dying not in fire but in confusion, and the only sound on the human channels was the steady, quiet work of 400 people doing their jobs. Lena Marsh had fought loud battles, long ago, before Veld. She had thought, then, that loud was how victory sounded. She knew better now. The loudest battles were the close ones, the desperate ones, the ones where both sides still believed they might win. This battle was not close, and it was not desperate, and it was the most certain victory ever won by a single ship. And that was exactly why it was so quiet. There was nothing left to shout about. There was only the long, steady settling of an account, hull by drifting hull, second opinion by second opinion, all the way down to the thrones. She found that she was grateful for the quiet, in the end. It let her hear the crew. It let her say their names. It let the 400 ghosts of Veld spend their last hours, not in the screaming chaos of a desperate fight, but in the calm, clear, almost peaceful work of finishing the thing they had come to finish, surrounded by the failing silence of the empire that had killed their world. It was, she thought, a good way to spend a debt. Quietly, certainly, together, with the dead of Veld arriving in every steady hand on every steady console, finishing the trip the 400,000 had started, on a stolen ship, in a quiet that was not the quiet of fear, but the quiet of people who had nothing left to be afraid of, and everything left to give. The 12 tried, in the end, to do the one thing that might have saved them, and they could not do it, because doing it would have meant ceasing to be the 12. The speaker of the 12, with the doubt thick in the heart of the one mind, reached for the only escape the unity had left. It could cut the link. It could sever the connection between the 12 thrones and the failing armada, between throne and throne, between the one mind and itself, and in cutting it, stop the doubt from spreading any further. It would mean the end of the black tide as a single mind. It would mean 10,000 hulls going blind and silent in the dark, an empire of bodies with no mind to fly them. But it would stop the doubt at the thrones, and the 12 themselves might survive, might begin again, might rebuild the one mind clean from the throne world outward. The speaker reached for the cut, and the doubt reached the speaker first. To cut the link, the 12 had to be certain. They had to know, with the perfect unified certainty that had defined them for 11,000 years, that cutting the link was the right thing to do. And they were not certain, because the doubt was in them, the human doubt, the small, cold question that asked whether any order they gave was truly the one mind's will. The 12 reached for the certainty they needed to save themselves, and found, where the certainty had always been, the doubt the humans had planted, and so they could not make the cut, and so the link stayed open, and so the doubt kept spreading, and the one mind of the concordance, which had never once been unable to act, sat frozen on its 12 thrones, unable to give the one order that might have saved it, because giving it required a certainty it would never have again. Lena Marsh watched the throne world's defenses fall still beneath her, and she opened the hail, and she spoke to the 12 for the last time. "This is the warship Cold Account," she said. 9 months ago you sent a ship to absorb a colony called Veld. 400,000 people lived on Veld. They had no fleet. They had no army. When your ship came down to join them, they spent every one of their lives, all 400,000, in a single pulse, to cut your ship off from your mind for 11 seconds. They did that so that 400 of us could get aboard and take the ship. They knew they would not survive it. They did it anyway, because they understood something. It has taken you 11,000 years to begin to understand. They understood that there are things worth more than survival. You have never understood that, because you have never been able to die. You are one mind. You thought that made you immortal. It only made you fragile, because a thing that cannot imagine its own death cannot imagine the cost of anything, and a thing that cannot imagine the cost of anything will always, in the end, be beaten by something that can. The 12 heard her, and could not answer, because they could no longer agree on what to say. "You ordered Earth to kneel," Marsh went on. "Earth will not kneel. Earth will never kneel, to you or to anything, and the reason is standing on the bridge of your own flagship, saying these words to you. We are the species that gets inside a thing and takes it apart from within. You taught us how. You did it to Veld. We learned it, and we did it to your whole empire, with one ship and one question, and 400 people who had already paid for it with everything they had. The account is settled now. Not Veld's account, that can never be settled. 400,000 people do not come back. But your account, the account of 11,000 years, and 900 species, and every world you ever ordered to kneel. We are settling it now, here, over your own throne, where you can watch." She turned from the hail to her crew, to Greer at the guns, to Park at the burned consoles, to the 400 ghosts of Veld in the rib dark of a ship that had once been their enemies. "The doubt is loose," she said, to all of them, on the ship's own channel. "It can't be stopped. The black tide is finished, whatever happens to us now. Theo says it's already too deep in the one mind to pull out. We've done what we came to do. Earth is safe. The tide is broken. The thing that ends worlds will never be one clean mind again." She paused, and looked at the throne world beneath them, and the cold thing in her chest that had been turning since Veld came at last all the way around. But the 12 are still alive down there. The doubt will eat them eventually, but eventually isn't good enough. Veld doesn't get an eventually. Veld got 11 seconds. So we're going to make sure the 12 get exactly that long too. The Cold Account carried, in her captured keel, a weapon the Unity had built into every throne-class hull. A weapon meant to crack open a defiant world from orbit. The weapon the patient harvest of the 9th throne had been carrying when it came to absorb Veld. The humans had never fired it. They had saved it. They had carried it 9 months across the dark for exactly this. For the throne world, for the 12, for the account. "Greer," Marsh said, "charge the keel weapon. Target the command spire. The thrones." Greer's hands moved across the surviving consoles, and deep in the captured hull, the weapon the Unity had built to break worlds began to charge, and the throne world's own sensors registered it charging, and the 12, frozen on their thrones, unable to cut the link, unable to flee, unable to agree on a single order to save themselves, felt their own weapon turning toward them in the hands of the lesser things they had ordered to kneel. "Charging," Greer said. 60 seconds to full. And in those 60 seconds, the Unity did the only thing it had left, the thing it had never once done in 11,000 years, the thing it had made 900 species do. and had never imagined doing itself. It begged. The begging was not the only thing the 12 did in those last seconds. It was only the loudest. While the 12 voices broke apart across the local hail, the thrones tried, underneath the begging, every escape a dying god could reach for. First they tried to flee. There were escape paths built into the command spire of Aubrek, ways for the thrones to lift clear of the throne world and scatter into the dark, because even the Unity had once, long ago, imagined a day when the heart of the Concordance might need to run. But to run, the 12 had to act, and to act, they had to agree, and they could no longer agree, because the doubt was in the agreeing. 3 of the thrones began to lift, 4 did not. 2 began and then stopped, uncertain whether the lifting was the one mind's true will. The escape that had been built for a single decisive will failed completely in the hands of a will divided into 12 frightened pieces, and the thrones that had begun to lift settled back down, because a throne cannot flee alone when it has spent 11,000 years unable to do anything alone. Then, beneath the begging, the 12 tried to bargain in earnest, and the offers came up the hail in a rising flood. The secrets of the link, the locations of 100 absorbed worlds, the surrender of the entire concordance, the joining undone, the 900 species freed. Lena Marsh listened to the offers the way she had listened to the order to kneel, without anger and without mercy. "You are offering to undo the joining," she said. "You cannot undo it. The one mind is already coming apart on its own. You are offering me a thing that is already happening, in exchange for the one thing you have that I want, which is for you to feel, for 60 seconds, what every world you absorbed felt for all of theirs. That is not a trade. That is just you, finally, paying." On the bridge, the 400 ghosts of Veld worked their stations through the last of it, with a calm that would have frightened anyone who did not understand where it came from. There was no panic, because panic is a thing you feel when you are afraid of losing something, and they had already lost everything that could be lost. Greer held the keel weapons targeting steady on the command spire, and watched the charge climb. Park, his burned hands slow and exact, kept the channels open and the doubt flowing, and Lena Marsh stood at the center of the bridge, over the throne world, and watched the empire that had killed Veld try and fail to save itself. She thought of the day the order to kneel had arrived, and of the answer she had given it. "You should not have given us anything. We will need less." She had meant it as defiance then. She understood now that it had been a promise, and that she was about to keep it. The Concordance had given humanity one rotation. Humanity had needed one ship, one question, and 400 people who were not afraid to die. The thrones had given away far too much when they gave Earth a deadline, because a deadline assumes the enemy is trying to survive, and a deadline is worthless against an enemy that has already chosen not to. "Charge at 90%, Greer said. "Hold targeting," Marsh said. The begging rose and broke and rose again on the hail, 12 voices that could no longer be won, and she let it wash over the bridge, and she did not flinch from it, and the cold account in her chest came, at last, toward its final reckoning. There was time, in the last minute, for one more thing, and Lena Marsh used it for the crew. She did not make a speech. The time for speeches had been on the approach, and she had given it then. Now, with the keel weapon climbing toward full charge, and the begging breaking apart on the hail, and the throne world frozen beneath them, she simply walked once around the ribbed dark of the bridge, past every bolted console, and she said each of their names, not their ranks, their names. The wiry link officer with the burned hands, the broad comm gunner who had buried her family in the pulse, the pilot who had flown a stolen 8-kilometer hull through a wall of 10,000 ships and never once flinched, the young one at the sensors, who had been a child on Veld and was not a child anymore. All 400, by name, on the ship's own channel, slowly, while the charge climbed, because a name was the one thing the Concordance had taken from every species it absorbed, the first thing to go in the joining, and Lena Marsh wanted the last sound on the cold account to be 400 human names spoken aloud by someone who knew them. When she had said the last name, she stopped at the center of the bridge and looked at the throne world in the glass, and she said, "To the crew, and to the dark, and to the dead of Veld, and to the thing on the thrones that was begging and could not stop, we are the ones who would not kneel. Say it with me, one time, loud enough that the link carries it." And the 400 ghosts of Veld, in the belly of their enemy's own flagship, over the heart of an empire 11,000 years old, set it together, one time, and the captured link carried it up into the one mind whole and clear, a single human sentence riding into the thrones ahead of the doubt and the weapon, the last thing the Unity heard before the end that was its own true voice, and the first thing it ever heard that it could not absorb. We are the ones who would not kneel. The Unity heard it. All of it heard it. Every drifting hull and every silent world and every frozen throne. And it understood, in the way a thing understands its own death, that the sentence was true, and that it had always been true, and that the one fatal mistake of 11,000 years had been to believe that anything which could be ordered to kneel was a thing that could be ruled. The species that knelt could be absorbed, the species that would not kneel could only be killed, and the species that would rather die than kneel could not even be killed, not really. Because it spent its death buying something, and a thing that spends its death buying something has already won the only victory that ever mattered. Charge complete, Greer said. Captain, the weapon is hot. Theo, Lena Marsh said, help them pull us home. Greer spoke once more before the end, watching the charge sit at full and the begging break apart on the hail. My family is on this ship, she said. She did not mean the crew, though she meant them too. In the link, I mean. Everyone we lost on Veld, we carried them here. Every copy of the Doubt has a little of Veld in it, because we built it out of what they taught us. So when we pour it into the thrones, we're not just sending a weapon, we're sending them. All 400,000. They're going to be the last thing the Concordance ever feels. She looked at the throne world, steady, dry-eyed. I like that. They never got to see the end of it. Now they will. Now they get to be the end of it. They will, Marsh said. Hold your targeting, Greer. We're almost there. Holding, Greer said, and held. The way the whole ship held. The way Veld had held for 11 seconds 9 months ago. The way humanity held against everything that ever tried to make it kneel. And the keel weapon waited at full charge. And the link waited to collapse. And the 400 ghosts of a dead colony waited, calm and certain and unafraid, to finish what their world had begun. Then Theo Park, working his burned consoles, went suddenly still, and then said, in a voice gone tight, Captain, they're not just begging. While they beg, they're trying one last thing, the link. They can't cut it clean. The doubt won't let them be certain enough, but they're trying to collapse it the other way. They're trying to pull everything back into the thrones. All 10,000 ships. All the doubt. All of it. Into the 12 at once. If they do it, the doubt burns out the armada, but the thrones might survive the collapse. They might come through it as one mind again. Clean. Certain. Starting over. He looked up, and the collapse would take us with it. We're on the link. We're the deepest poison in it. When they pull everything into the thrones, they pull us in too. The cold account would be the first thing the collapse eats. Marsh did not hesitate. She had stopped being able to hesitate at Veld. How long until they finish the collapse? 30 seconds. Maybe less. Captain, it's a race. The keel weapon at 40 seconds, the collapse at 30. They're going to pull us into the link and burn us out before the weapon fires. We're going to lose the race. There it was. The last math. The one Lena Marsh had known was coming since the moment she turned the stolen ship toward Aubrek. The weapon would not charge in time. The 12 would collapse the link first, and the collapse would take the cold account. And the 400 ghosts of Veld would die a second time inside the very thing they had stolen. And there was, by the laws of war the humans had written, no way to win the race. But Lena Marsh had not come to win the race. She had come to settle the account, and there was more than one way to settle it. Theo, she said, don't fight the collapse. Help it. Park stared at her. They're pulling everything on the link into the thrones, Marsh said. Everything. Including us, including the keel weapon, including the doubt, all of it, every copy of it loose in 10,000 hulls, all rushing back into the 12 at once. So let them pull, open every channel we have, don't hold a single thing back, give them all of it. The doubt, the ship, the weapon, the account, all of it, straight into the thrones, as fast as it will go. They want to collapse the link into themselves? Then we collapse into them too. And we bring everything with us, and we make sure that whatever comes out the other side of that collapse is not one clean mind starting over. We make sure it is the Doubt, and Veld, and 400 ghosts, and a charging weapon, all arriving in the 12 at the same instant. Let them pull us home. We'll be the worst thing they ever brought inside. Park understood. His burned hands moved across the consoles, and instead of fighting the collapse, he opened the cold account wide to it. Every channel, every system, the charging keel weapon and all, and the 400 survivors of Veld poured their stolen ship and everything in it up the link toward the 12 thrones, as fast as the collapse would carry them. The 12 pulled, and the Doubt came home, all of it. 10,000 hulls worth of the small, cold human question, rushing back into the thrones at once, no longer spread thin across an armada, but concentrated, focused, every copy of it, arriving in the one mind in a single instant. And riding the flood of doubt came the cold account, and Veld, and the keel weapon that had finished charging in the very moment of the collapse, charged and pointed straight down the link, into the heart of the thing that was pulling it home. The command spire of Obrecht did not crack open from orbit. It cracked open from within. The keel weapon, fired down the collapsing link instead of through the dark, arrived inside the one mind at the same instant the concentrated doubt did, and the 12, reaching to pull their empire back into themselves and begin again clean, pulled instead a charging world breaker and the distilled doubt of 10,000 ships directly into their own thrones, and the one mind of the concordance ended not with a fleet defeated in the dark, but with the heart of itself collapsing inward around the worst thing the lesser things had ever taught it to feel. The cold account died in the same instant. There was no surviving the collapse from the deep end of it. The 400 ghosts of Veld went into the light with the thing they had come to kill, and Lena Marsh, on a bridge built by her enemies, felt the cold thing in her chest finally come to rest, and her last thought was not of dying, because she had been past the fear of that since Veld. Her last thought was that the account was settled, and that Earth would not kneel, and that 400,000 people had spent 11 seconds to buy this, and it had been enough. Earth never received the order's deadline at all. The rotation the Unity had given humanity to kneel passed without a single concordance ship arriving, because every concordance ship had been recalled to Obrecht to face one stolen hull, and at Obrecht, the entire armada had come apart in the dark, 10,000 blind hulls drifting without a mind to fly them, the one mind that had ordered them there gone, collapsed, ended, in the cracking of a spire on a throne world no human ever saw. It took the surviving concordance worlds a long time to understand what had happened, because the thing that had always told them what to think was no longer there to tell them. The link was dead. The one mind was gone. 900 absorbed species, joined for 11,000 years into a single will, woke one by one into the silence of their own heads, alone, uncertain, doubting, free. Some of them remembered being themselves, long ago, before the joining. Most did not. But all of them, in the silence where the one mind had been, eventually found the same small, cold human question waiting for them, the doubt that had brought the empire down, copying itself outward from a dead throne world into 100 billion newly separate minds. Are you sure this is what you want? The humans had a name for the ship that asked it, though no human had been aboard to carry the name home. They reconstructed the story later from the deadline that never came, from the armada that drifted blind, from the dead link and the silent thrones, and they put it together the way you put together the shape of a thing from the hole it leaves. One ship, 400 ghosts, a stolen flagship and a stolen key, and an account 9 months in the settling. The fleet captain, who had told the entire concordance, in the first rotation, that they should not have given Earth anything, because Earth would need less. She had been right. Earth had needed less than one rotation. But Earth had needed one ship, one question, and 400 people who had already decided that there were things worth more than coming home. They built no statue. The 400 had not done it for a statue, and the people who came after them understood that, the way you understand the wishes of the dead by the shape of what they died for. Instead, on the edge of human space, where the lanes ran out toward the dark that had once held the concordance, the fleet kept a single channel open, always, broadcasting nothing but a name and a date and 7 words, on the frequency the Unity had once used to order worlds to kneel. Cold account, Veld, we will need less, kneel to no one. It still broadcasts. Out past the edge of the dark, where the one mind used to be and is not anymore. The small, cold human question keeps spreading, mind to freed mind, and the powerful who hear it learn, the way the 12 learned in their last 60 seconds on the throne, that the thing which gets inside you and takes you apart from within is not the tide. It is the species that was never afraid to die, and so could never be made to kneel.